Yeah, she plays the flute too. There's some of you mumbling. We gotta line them all up one day and have you just go from one to the next and see what happens.
Write a song for it.
Yeah, something. 3 times with me. There is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. So we've been on this metaphysical journey through Advent, or the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, and like I said earlier, it's already been a really miraculous, amazing month of we call them miracles, and by miracles I mean watching the principles that we teach fully in action and activated and moving through this community and the people in it, and creating the lives that we are wanting to fully live and express here and out in this community. So the first week we spoke of faith, and the faith described by the story of Mary and Joseph and their willingness to bring forth the gift that was theirs to give to the world, even though it was scary and difficult sometimes. And last week we spoke of peace and the journey to peace and inner peace that has to be taken in order to find it. It's the hero's journey, and I hope that I honored the memory of Nelson Mandela in my brief description of his life and that journey. We also took a step in declaring our own gifts to community, this community, the greater community, to our own lives, that we bring by writing those gifts on an ornament and coming up here and being willing to speak them into the world and speak them out loud and saying, this is who I am and what I bring, and so that it could be more fully activated within us. And I have to say, I'm pretty sure this is the most beautiful tree ever. Mm-hmm. I kept coming out here this week and just kind of staring at it, and I haven't read all of it. I don't know. I can only read a few of them at a time because I know some of, I don't know. It's just that kind of thing. But if you weren't here last week, what I hope that you would be willing to do, there's some extra ornaments and pens up here, that you would add yours to this at the end of service today. And 12 people stepped into membership last week, declaring this CCSL to be their spiritual home. I know, it's been an incredible month, yeah. And it's only like the 15th. So to move on with that, John quoted Jesus in 1 John, where he said, abide in my love. And so today, as we make our way towards the Christmas day, we honor love as a part of that Advent message, that solid message. That the thing of that is, I kept thinking, it's sometimes I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot when I start to talk about love, because it's kind of our highest principle. It's the guiding principle that we live by and teach by and live in, because to me it is the closest word. It is the closest thing that we have in our minds that we can encompass that really understands spirit or God or the force as a thing, because it's so hard to put the infiniteness of all of that into our language. And love is the closest thing we have. So very simply, God is love. Just God is love. And if God is love and we are not separate from God, then we are also love. And it is, sometimes I feel like it's this really nice, warm and fuzzy thing, and sometimes I feel like it's simply our responsibility to understand and know that and put it into work in the world. It's our job in a way. And in order to do that, we have to come to a place where we understand. And by understand, I don't mean like we think it, because we think a lot of things here. We're really good at thinking. The longest hero's journey there is the one from our hearts, from our heads to our hearts. and activating that out in the world and being risky and bold and willing to put ourselves out there hearts first. But to really know in that word gnosis, that totally encompassing way that God is love. And that is who we are and what we are here to be. And then to know from that every single being on this planet is of the same likeness and the same inner potential and the same everything that Spirit is, so that we can understand that there is no other. There is no other, and we will stop making anyone else less than or other. And I thought that I had this talk all kind of figured out in my head, like by Thursday, which is kind of a miracle in our house because usually that doesn't happen. And how I wanted to speak of love and this overriding love thing. And then I heard the news on Friday, and I got sent back into sort of, I don't know, it really hit me, especially because it was just 1 year after Newtown, and I had this memory of trying to hold it together last year to talk about that. And I listened to a little bit of the news, and I looked a little bit online, and of course, Facebook stuff and all of that, and all I kept hearing was people calling this young man the shooter. And that really hit me in this way of making someone other, or of separating ourselves so fully. And what I want to say is that his name was Carl Pearson. And I don't know what went wrong, and I don't know how he got there, or he got to that place, or if what happened, and I know that the debate will fly. And what I know also is that when I let go of my own fear, and I work into the place of compassion about all of it, I know that his name was Carl. And that for anyone, any kid, anyone, to feel so separated and alone and afraid that their only answer is to seek out to harm someone else and then to take their own life, and that somehow he got there without any help, is just sad and unconscionable in a way. And I don't know how to fix it. And I know that we're going to hear about guns and video games and his mother and his, whatever. I'm like, yes, at some point we have to figure out what it is that creates this separation in these kids. But it's not about blame. It's about finding an answer. Because what I know is that somehow in that moment, love did not get through. I know that he was loved, and that there are people that are really hurting about him today also. And I know that when I step back from judgment and fear and consider in this month when so many miraculous things happen, that if I start to hear all of the debate and I ask myself, what would love do differently? How would love show up in this if love were showing up in this? That maybe there's a different answer. And I can also remember this girl, Claire, in my prayers this week, who is also struggling, and her family is also hurting. And I know that we can know for her the absolute highest outcome in her healing right now, today. Because the prayers that we hold in this room travel well beyond these walls, as we have seen. And I'm going to only say this one thing about guns ever, and that is, if you own them, awesome. I don't care how responsible or smart you think your kids are, please lock them up and hide the key really, really, really well. Because kids are not that smart sometimes. And love would have us be responsible. And love would have us step back from the controversy. And love would have us look at anyone who appears to be feeling separated and disenfranchised and just pull them in You don't have to hug them because they don't know you. You don't have to do anything weird. You can just look at someone in the eye and say, hello. And that is enough to make a difference. And when we look at this biblical Christmas story and we look at the part that love had to play in it from this more metaphysical perspective, let me say this. It includes this journey for me this week, includes this reminder that this is a story. And sometimes that's hard. I grew up in a very evangelical Christian tradition. And when I went to my first metaphysical Bible class in ministerial school, and we were doing the Old Testament, the professor, who was previously a Jesuit priest who is now a New Thought minister, we'd start talking about all these stories and Jonah and the whale, and then in the middle of it he would pop in with, you remember these aren't true. We'd be like, oh, right, they're metaphor. And their lesson, and they come from a time when storytelling was a way to bring life to lessons, because most people couldn't read. Storytelling was how people educated each other. And this story is much the same. There was no scribe. There was nobody following Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem to write it all down. And it's hard to remember that too, because we live in a land of everybody's getting followed by a video camera and writing it all down, So what about all those other characters in the story? The wise men, the shepherds, the star, all of that. And I thought, well, there's something in every part of this story. It's like some people do dream analysis by putting themselves into every character in their dream. This story, there is something in every part of it about this thing called love. And so this part of the story that I want to talk about today, I'm going to quote Linus, actually. I don't have a blanket. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, watching over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were afraid. And the angel said to them, fear not, for behold, I bring unto you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you this day is born in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord, and this shall be a sign unto you. You shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men and women. I know he meant to say. There's something about this story, isn't there? It brings, I don't know, there's something, maybe it's our history, maybe it's this, there's so much power in this moment of the story. Because when I hear this, it's really simple. Angels, the inner voice that speaks to me, says, be not afraid. There are great things. Be not afraid. And so when I am in stillness, minding my own flock, and by flock, I mean all of the voices running around in my head that don't sound like the chorus of a flock of seagulls, but really sound loud like a flock, I kept thinking, every time I said flock of seagulls, I started hearing some dumb song from the 80s. Minding their flock, minding our own thoughts, minding our own lives, minding our own way of being. Because that's ours to do. That's ours to do. And when I'm quiet, and when I quiet all of that noise in the stillness, my higher voice, that higher voice within each and every one of us, will always lead us to the place of Christ consciousness, to the highest good possible, to the place of love and peace, which is what that was all about, is the highest truth and calling. That inner voice, when I'm centered and connected, is one of peace and goodwill to all. And when I am in that place of peace and goodwill, I spread the same to all. And then why shepherds? Why shepherds? Shepherds at the time, that was the uneducated, grungy, dirty job. I'm sure that we could think of some that we have like that now too, in our world. Shepherds slept with the sheep, they lived with the sheep, they walked with the sheep, there were no showers. They smelled like shepherds, they lived like shepherds, and they couldn't read or write. That just wasn't there for them. And so why shepherds? I think because it's very clear to me that the message is for everyone. And if you look at the history of that time, which, I try to encourage you when we look at these Bible stories, we got to look at the history and the time and the language and all of that. When you look at the history of that time, and the only people who were educated, and normally the only people who could tell these, greater truths or had connection to God were prophets, or the higher ups in the church and the higher ups in the governments of the time. And so for a story to come out that says a shepherd heard an angel speak, or a shepherd heard God speak, was fairly unheard of. Because the only stories were of the prophets who were held in this place of high esteem. And so the shepherd, to me, this message is available to everyone. And that was really important in this changing of the time to becoming nicer people, frankly, and people who were more inclusive of all. So I keep thinking, well, okay, I probably could have shortened that whole thing into 3 sentences. Connect to your inner higher voice, be at peace, share love. And if you hear nothing else today, connect to your higher voice, be at peace, share love. It's really, the whole thing is that simple. So then we have the wise men coming from the east. Now the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary speaks of the east as the place of coming from within. So the wise men come from within. And that is so easy that I'm not even going to talk about it anymore. Really. I'm pretty sure y'all got it. So it is in the birth of Jesus, who started life as a poor child born to working Jewish parents, that we can see the potential of that consciousness, the consciousness of Christ, available to each and every one of us as we are willing to step out and travel the road, which is what he did. He had to travel. There is no information about him from pretty much birth to 30. There's not a whole lot out there, because he had to learn. And and it's also good to remember that at that time, lifespans were 40 or 50? So he was old when he started. We're not old at 50. Their lives were older. We're done then. Did you catch that?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm working on it. But every single one of us, the main thrust of it is that every single one of us, no matter what our beginning or our middle or our past or our current circumstances, no matter what it is, every single one of us is a child of God and has love and light and healing potential and the grace of Christ living right here within us. All of that is available to each and every one of us. So we can follow a star. We can allow light and love to shine from us, and we follow that star first, from thinking about it to moving it into our hearts to holding it out here where others can see it and be and participate in it and know that that is how we are bringing ourselves into the world. And be vulnerable in that and be not afraid, all at the same time. We give it out, we receive it back. We give it out and we receive it back. And again, we talk a lot about that. Change your thinking, change your life, clear your mind, focus your thoughts on good. And sometimes I talk to you and I know that you're doing all the right things and you feel like you're doing all the right things and your life isn't moving forward as fast as you want it to, or life is just being life. And sometimes life just being life includes things that don't are up and down and moving and lonely or sad or frustrated and all of that makes life so fully and richly what it sometimes is and what it sometimes is not. And we speak of being co-creators of our experience, you know.